All right, good morning, everybody. Hope you guys are having a good start to your weekend. um, I do have to express some regret on a couple of fronts. I know that the time and the exact date of this webinar has changed more than once in the last week or so. Um, During the process of putting this together, I sought to have uh, additional professional colleagues join me for this presentation, and so I was trying to work with their schedule in order to come up with a time that was suitable. Because I think, as you guys know, there were supposed to be additional topics covered today that did not purely involve the interstates of Iowa. We were going to talk about other things, and so I wanted to bring other individuals into the discussion that would be able to shed some light on some of the technical matters involved with these other subjects that we were going to discuss. However, as a result of that, we had to change around the schedule a little bit. So that's why we're doing this presentation now, as opposed to at a couple of other junctures that may have been more convenient for more people to watch. So that's one thing. The other thing that I have to express some regret about is that the professional colleague that I was going to have join me this morning didn't show up. So we are now back to square one, which is, I'm not even going to talk about the other stuff that I had planned for today because it doesn't make any sense for me to do that solo. So we're just going to stick to Iowa after all. And I recognize that will decrease the quality of this morning's presentation to some degree, but ultimately it is the best option as far as ensuring that something gets salvaged from today. So again, I welcome you to this morning's presentation. I recognize that this is not the most convenient time for most of you to tune in, but we're going to make the most of this regardless. So, as I say in show business, the show must go on, and we are going to go on with our presentation this morning, purely focusing on the interstates of Iowa, which was a significant addition to the July 2019 road trip that centered around Chicago, but also I was able to find a way to incorporate some stuff from way outside of Chicagoland, as you will see this morning. So, before we get going, anybody in here is a baseball fan? We are down to our final four in the Major League Baseball playoffs of 2019. And it is worth noting that this is the first year in the baseball realm that we have an all Roadway Whiz semifinal, with all four cities pictured here being visited and their freeways chronicled. Of course, as you know, we have the New York Yankees pitted against the Houston Astros. New York is, of course, my home metropolitan area. Houston was the anchor city of the 2018 winter trip. And then in the National League, we have St. Louis, which was added in May of 2019, and whose material has really not seen the light of day to this point. And Washington, D.C., which was first visited, I believe, in 2013. And I've been there a few times. I think most recently in 2016. So that's a little nugget for you sports fans out there. Have not yet had a all-whiz Super Bowl. That would be the last of the four major sports to have that feat accomplished. We've been close a few times. I mean, New England's been in the Super Bowl every year practically, so I've had the AFC covered pretty well. But no, the NFC team has not the home city of the NFC team has not been a city I've visited. Maybe that'll change this year. Who knows? All right, so some announcements here. I'll skip down to the second bullet here first real quick. We're still working through California. I am working through Sacramento and the Central Valley. As I mentioned in a community post on YouTube, I will reach the end of my California upload schedule on October 24th. At that point, we will gradually transition to a new series apart from the winter 2019 material. So that is the general schedule for the rest of this month, and I would imagine that whatever series I go on to next will keep me busy through the end of the year and probably into the early part of 2020. So that's what you have to look forward to. I have not actually settled on exactly what I'm doing with this next series. That would probably get underway in earnest around Halloween and then continue for a while after that. But we'll see. I still have some time to make up my mind. Upcoming trips. I'm going to be in Buffalo, New York next weekend, doing some stuff, updating some coverage. And when I say Buffalo, I'm also talking about probably Rochester and Syracuse as well along the way. There have been some significant changes in those cities over the last few years that I would like to document and incorporate into my broader video catalog. So we'll be doing that for a weekend. October 26th is the Newburyport, Massachusetts road meet. As far as I know, that is still going ahead. I have not seen an itinerary for it yet, so I really can't give you more detail about what it's going to consist of. But there will be a live stream of that meet tour, as has become typical with the meets that I have attended in the last couple of years. And then we also have something that I'm working on, is a sequel to the online road meet from Pennsylvania that we did earlier this summer. I'm working on something else, a new one. I have not settled on a date yet for it. I have not settled officially on a team that will help me broadcast that. But I do have an idea for when it would be, and I would like to do it sometime in November. So we'll see how that shakes out. Again, I would like to wait until after Newburyport is in the rearview mirror to officially make that announcement. So I would not expect anything until around Halloween as far as an announcement for the when and where for that. I have picked out an itinerary for it, though. And I think you guys will really like it. So that is something to keep in the back of your mind for the month of November. And then after November, we have the holidays. We have Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. I usually do some travel in the New York to Delaware and Maryland corridor during that time period. So that's another optimal chance to do live drives and maybe even add some new material here and there. That's usually a prime time for me to do some of that stuff. So we'll see what the holidays this winter shake out to be. And as I mentioned in another YouTube community post, this is around when we have our first inklings of what's going to happen in winter of 2020 with that road trip. I have to tell you that the winter of 2019 was more or less decided this time last year. I knew that I was going to do Hawaii, and that was going to be one of the centerpieces of that trip. And I had all of that booked already by that point. I do not have anything officially booked yet. I do have an idea or a concept that I would really like to take and run with as far as an anchor city goes. I do believe that this trip will be a lot simpler in construction, and it will feature roads that are a lot easier to film. And that is more or less a response to how difficult it was to film places like Hawaii and San Francisco last time. It nothing short of drove me absolutely crazy to do those areas. So, that said, I'm looking to do something a lot simpler this time around, and I think that the anchor city that I have chosen preliminarily will accomplish that. So, hopefully, all of that will pan out. However, the one thing that I will mention about this is that in order for this one anchor city to work, in order for me to go with it, something has to happen between now and, say, the end of the year. There is the expectation that something will take place in this anchor city before the end of the year. And provided that that does happen, then the city that I have in mind will be the launching point for this winter trip. If what I am saying is supposed to happen does not happen, we're going to have to find a plan B for the winter, which I might have in the back of my mind already, but hopefully I don't need to go to a plan B. Hopefully everything works out the way that at least everybody is saying it will, and we'll be able to take this trip that I have in mind in the coming winter, probably the month of February. February is the month that I've settled on in recent years for these winter trips, and I do not expect 2020 to be any different. All right, now as I said, we were going to discuss the Wheeling Suspension Bridge and some of the current events involving that. However, as I said at the onset of this presentation, I do not have a co-host with me today, so I do not see the point of discussing this. I'll leave these slides up. You can feel free to pause them and read them and take a look at them on your own. There's some interesting stuff in here. There's some stuff that I really recommend that you look into on your own time, but we're not going to discuss it in full today. I don't feel like I could give you enough of a sense of what's going on here just solo. So, unfortunately, we're going to scrap this part of it. Alright, so anyway, there are two major metropolitan areas in Iowa that I explored. What are known as the Quad Cities on the Mississippi River, which is where the river separates Iowa and Illinois. The Quad Cities are Davenport and Bettendorf, Iowa, and Rock Island and Moline, Illinois. As you can see by the map here, we have more or less a beltway around the Quad Cities, with Interstate 80 forming the north and east side of this loop, and Interstate 280 overlapped partly with Interstate 74, forming the west and south loop of this beltway. And then 74 runs more or less right through the center of that. So, real quick, we'll run through the main highways here that we covered. 88 we talked about quite a bit with Chicago and the tollways. Remember, 88 begins out in Chicagoland and makes its way all the way out here to the Quad Cities. So it's a major second highway that connects these two areas, 80 being the other interstate. However, 88 is a bit more direct. The only downside to 88 is, of course, once you get further east, it becomes a tollway, which a lot of people dislike. Um, it began life as a state highway slash relocated U.S. Route 30, um, and it was promoted, of course, to interstate status as a way of working around the national maximum speed limit law that had been in place since the 70s, and this interstate became numbered 88 in 1987 as a way of allowing a higher speed limit. Um, as it turns out, the NMSL was made redundant in subsequent years, so the purpose of the interstate therefore went away. However, the interstate still exists today, and I don't suspect that it's going anywhere anytime soon. So whereas in our tollways webinar from Chicagoland we were talking about the eastern end of 88, here's a look at the west end of 88. It's about 138 miles in total, and its western terminus is at I-80 near Moines, Illinois. If you're going eastbound, the exit for Route 30 East is the last exit before the tollway begins. And this is your first tollway sign going eastbound at exit 44. 80 is a major transcontinental interstate, as we know. It forms, as I mentioned before, that northern and eastern leg of the Quad Cities Beltway. It's a major highway across Iowa. It's the main east-west interstate across that state. The Quad Cities is right in between other major cities such as Des Moines and Chicago, as I mentioned. Where it crosses the Mississippi River is on the Fred Schwenkel Bridge, which is a pretty narrow 4-lane bridge with no shoulders. Not an optimal river crossing by any stretch. Also, west of the Quad Cities is the Iowa 80 truck stop. It is the world's largest truck stop. We'll actually be seeing a preview video that I did of that complex a little later in the program. It's quite an impressive complex. It's got pretty much everything that you could possibly imagine on this entire campus. That is, again, right off of the interstate, just west of Davenport. So in the upper left, here's the interstate as it crosses the Mississippi. Again, this is a pretty narrow bridge. It does its job though. And here is 80 eastbound approaching the split for 280 west of Davenport. Notice the change of Control City to Chicago at this point, going east. And 280's control points are the two cities in Illinois that make up the Quad Cities. So 74 begins at Interstate 80, north of Bettendorf, and runs more or less north-south right through the middle of the metropolitan area. And it forms basically the middle inner loop portion of the Quad Cities freeway system, connecting the north leg of the Beltway with the southern leg. And it's also one of the main crossings of the Mississippi River in this area, and it's a crossing that has long been out of date and has long been in need of replacement. And in fact, why don't we just get right down to it right now and talk about that bridge in particular. The I-74 twin spans were built in 1935 and 1959. They are basically identical. The 1959 bridge was built off of the blueprints for the original, so the two are more or less the same. It's not exactly the same thing as what happened at the Delaware Memorial Bridge, for instance, where they actually drew up a separate set of plans for that bridge. They actually used the identical plans from 1935 to build the second span of this bridge. So the second bridge was opened in the late 1950s. Interstate 74 was created and then routed onto these bridges in the mid 70s. And it carries close to twice the amount of traffic that it was designed to carry. Each span is 2 lanes wide with no shoulders, and it's pretty clear that these bridges were not designed for heavy interstate highway traffic. So with that said, Iowa and Illinois have agreed to build a new twin span replacement structure, which got underway in 2017. The entire project is expected to be complete in 2022. It is a more than $1 billion investment when you include the reconstruction of the adjoining approach roads along the interstate. And once these new bridges are in place, the original suspension bridges will be removed. So you have, this is your current complex of twin spans, and they're more or less identical. Again, they were built off of the same blueprints, so I guess you would expect them to be the same. Very nice to look at, but not very nice to drive on, I have to say. And here's what they're building right now. Now keep in mind that these pictures were taken in early July, so I'm sure that there's been significant progress made since then. But this is going to be a twin span arch bridge. You can see they're well underway in completing the first arch span. It's really going to look neat once it's finished. You notice here the temporary towers that will actually house cable stays that will temporarily support the ends of the arch while it continues to grow out into the center of the river. And then once the keystone pieces are in place to connect the arch and make it a single structural entity, the temporary towers and cable stays will be removed, which will enable them to complete the rest of the roadway. As I said, this is a project that got underway a couple of years ago and is expected to be complete probably about 3 years from now. Now, they did have to shut down construction earlier this year because of major river flooding this spring, so I don't know what that has done to the schedule. I'm sure it's impacted it negatively, but so it remains to see exactly where they are on the schedule as far as that's concerned. But the hope is to have this job finished in 3 years. And then the existing I-74 gives you some nice views of the construction also. This is, the upper left photo is looking south towards the river. This is one of my favorite views that I saw on the entire trip, to be quite honest with you. And here's the view heading northbound on the northbound bridge. This is a neat view of the progress. Alright, so I-280 is the western and southern section of the Quad Cities Beltway. It also is significant in providing access to Quad Cities International Airport, which is right near the interchange of 280 and 74 south of Moines downtown. And the bridge that carries it across the Mississippi River is the Sergeant Baker Bridge, which is a very handsome looking arch bridge. I can show you, here it is in the lower right. It's a neat looking bridge. It's a neat looking color that they chose too. And I thought this sign in the upper left was interesting, how they have the Welcome to Illinois pasted onto a 280 auxiliary sign with Chicago as the control city. I thought that was a neat touch that they added there. By the way, these two photos are taken about a half a mile from each other. There's this one, and then a half a mile later, once you're on the other side of the bridge and you land in Illinois, here's the first sign that you see. So that's basically it for Quad Cities. The other major urban area that I explored was Des Moines, which is the largest city in Iowa. The name is French, in case you didn't know. It translates. The city's name is rooted in the name of the river that flows through downtown, the Des Moines River. And the French settlers named it as such, and it roughly translates to River of the Monks in French. So I guess the name of this city in French means more or less the monks. The French always have very interesting names for their settlements, especially in colonial times. So if we look at a map of the city of Des Moines, you'll notice that the two mainline interstates do not go through central Des Moines. That honor is reserved for Interstate 235. So 80 comes in from the east and exits to the west. 35 comes in from the north and exits to the south. But they both multiplex with each other in order to bypass the city altogether, which is a bit unusual. I think we would expect at least one of these two to instead go through town instead of around town altogether. And then the most recent addition to the freeway system would be the 565 bypass, which is this southeastern quadrant of the Des Moines Beltway. Again, we have a full beltway here, although it isn't like the Quad Cities, it is not under the same route number. So we have the 565 covering the east and south leg, and then we have a combination of 35 and 80 forming the north and west legs of this beltway. And then 235 more or less serves the purpose that 74 serves out in the Quad Cities, which is to more or less split the difference between the two and run right through the center of the metropolitan area. Now, 380 doesn't really belong either in the Quad Cities or in Des Moines. It is a long-distance spur that's out in the middle of the countryside between the two. It begins in Iowa City along I-80 and runs north through the city of Cedar Rapids and ends ultimately in Waterloo. It's quite a lengthy interstate. I think it's about 75 miles altogether. But it's mostly countryside, and it's not outside of Cedar Rapids. There's not a whole lot to see. This interstate has been closed on a couple of occasions due to major flooding. The historic 1993 flood, and again in 2008, the interstate was forced to be closed at the Iowa River because of major flooding, and it was flooding that was reminiscent of what we had along the Missouri River in Nebraska earlier this year that forced the closure of Interstate 29 between St. Joseph's, Missouri and Omaha, Nebraska for several weeks. Something similar happened here on 380 during those two floods. Now again, there's not a whole lot to see along 380 for its length, but the drive through Cedar Rapids is quite interesting. That's the view looking southbound. In the upper left, the lower right, we have northbound approaching the northern terminus in Waterloo. And in the final few miles of Interstate 380, the interstate actually kind of exits off of itself a couple of times because it multiplexes with other routes in the area in order to complete those final few miles. So it's kind of an interesting progression there for the last few miles. We actually have to take exits a couple of times in order to just stay on the interstate. Now, this trip in July added my first mileage to Interstate 35, which begins in Duluth, Minnesota, and runs south through the Twin Cities and Des Moines, Kansas City, Oklahoma, right on down to Laredo, Texas, and the Mexican border. Locally here in central Iowa, it is more or less the main north-south interstate. But again, it bypasses the central area of Des Moines to the north and west. It does take on a primarily suburban feel for most of its length, although Des Moines is a much quieter metro area compared to most metros I've visited over the years. These are a couple of views. Those of you who follow my Facebook page will recognize this photo in the lower right. And the same thing that we said about I-35 with respect to its importance in Iowa, we could also say about I-80 in the Des Moines area. Except in the case of 80, it's in the east-west direction instead of north-south. And of course, it again bypasses central Des Moines in favor of a multiplex with I-35 around the north and west quadrants of the metro area. Now, Iowa does not like to acknowledge the presence of Omaha, Nebraska. It chooses to sign Council Bluffs as its control city going west. But Omaha is the next sizable metropolitan area west of Des Moines. And again, this is a very straightforward freeway. And Des Moines it's a quiet town compared to most cities I'm used to exploring. So, not nearly as eventful as some of the places you've seen me put on video before. All right, now we can start to get serious here. So 235 runs straight through downtown Des Moines. It begins and ends at I-35 at each end. Was conceived as one of the first interstates in the state of Iowa. It was built in the 1960s and was given a complete makeover about 20 years ago. The original setup with 235 was that it was 4 lanes total, so 2 lanes per direction, with an occasional third lane for merging and for exiting. However, that was a very antiquated design, and Iowa DOT undertook a massive reconstruction project in the early 2000s in order to update the corridor and basically future-proof it by eliminating the chance of traffic bottlenecks for, at least the next generation or two. So they went from more or less underbuilding this freeway to potentially overbuilding it, but I would much rather have to deal with, an overbuilt freeway like Interstate 41 in Green Bay as opposed to an underbuilt one. So what they did ended up working out very well for them. And most of this freeway that you'll see is, if it looks new, that's because it is relatively new. This is a very pleasant urban freeway to drive. I enjoyed it very much. It was probably my favorite freeway in all of Iowa that I've had the chance to drive. Now, while we had the interstates in place since the 60s and the 70s, there was always the need for an extra highway out east of the city in order to complete something of a beltway around central Des Moines. And so this missing piece of the system was finally constructed in the 90s and was completed in the early 2000s. It has, to my knowledge, never been considered for interstate status. It is made up of two unique sections. There's a section for State Highway 5, and then that exits the freeway, and US Route 65 enters the freeway and carries it back northward towards Interstate 80. This is also the freeway that provides the most direct connection to Des Moines International Airport. So this freeway does see quite a bit of traffic. I post this photo in the upper left just to demonstrate how Iowa likes to sign their county routes. They use the New Jersey style blue pentagon with yellow background. However, they use a combination of letters and numbers for their county route designations. So, for example, exit 97 on this sign is for County Route R57, and I believe exit 96 is for R63. It's a little hard to read in this picture, but I think that's what that is. Whereas we're used to seeing either all numbers, as in New Jersey, or we're used to seeing all letters, as is the case in Wisconsin. Here, Iowa likes to throw a wrench in it and use both letters and numbers in the same route designation. And that's all I got for you. Again, Iowa was very straightforward. I believe I was in the state for a little more than 24 hours, but I was able to bring back a sizable amount of footage for 35, 80, and all the three-digit interstates between Des Moines, Iowa City, and the Quad Cities. So, obviously, we had good weather, and we were able to get through all of that in relatively short order. So, that's it for the slideshow. If anybody's got any questions, anything they want me to elaborate on or discuss further, otherwise we will move straight away into the video previews that I've got lined up for you guys. If I can find them. Here we go. Okay. So I guess the easiest thing to do is to start off with the videos that I think are going to have the most historical significance attached to them, and these are the videos of the old I-74 twin spans in Moines. And again, these bridges will be demolished upon completion of the new project, but it's significant to see what was here before these bridges were replaced. So that's really the main purpose of what I wanted to do with these. So this is the drive on the northbound bridge from Illinois into Iowa. You can see the new construction off to the right. As you see, this is a pretty antiquated bridge. The lanes are somewhat narrow, there's no shoulders. The bridges themselves are quite neat to look at. But they're just not suitable for the kinds of traffic that traverse them on a daily basis. Now, as a result of the new construction, a new exit has been created here because they have to fit the new bridge into the foreground here. So what they did was they forced all the traffic to exit at this point and then follow this ramp. And then you end up having to go through a couple of traffic lights on what I assume was the old service road, which is now the de facto at-grade interstate. And you'll go through a couple of lights and then you'll end up on the on-ramp back to the interstate. So that's how you would complete that cycle. Because the northbound or the westbound side of the interstate is closed in a couple of locations because of the construction. So it's not possible to drive the main line of I-74 in its entirety at this point because due to the closures that are in place because of construction, you're forced off at a couple of points and instead you have to follow the service road in order to complete the connection back to the interstate. So it is a little confusing, and the videos that I have of this corridor are more or less going to be of historical interest in future years. They will not necessarily paint a accurate picture of what the corridor actually looks like. Now here's a trip on the interstate eastbound or southbound. Again, you have the sweeping view of the new construction on the left as we transition onto the southbound span of the twin spans. Now the eastbound side of 74 remains open in its entirety, so in addition to crossing the bridge, as we head through Moines and get into Illinois, you'll be able to see a lot of the construction that's currently in place along the westbound side of 74, which is the reason why it's closed. So you'll see a lot of construction activity in this video. So I-74 meets I-280 at this point. In order to stay on 74, you would exit up ahead and join up with I-280 east for a few miles. Or you could continue straight ahead, which is what happens in this video, and you end up at the front door to Quad Cities International Airport. And of course, 280 heads west to ultimately cross back into Iowa on the Sergeant Baker Arch Bridge that we saw photos of, and we will actually... yeah, we'll get a look at that in this video. So this video starts in the northwest corner of the Quad Cities Beltway, where 80 splits away from 280, and we're going to follow 280 in this video as we head south from Iowa into Illinois. And this video will also include the bridge on the Mississippi River. If you can tell in the background, I still have a strong enough radio connection for WBBM News Radio out of Chicago, and that's the radio station of choice of this video series. It was basically the radio station of choice for the whole 9-day trip that I was in the midst of at this point. It had a strong signal. I was able to pick it up all the way out here. I think I had a decent signal on it as far west as Iowa City. And I picked it up pretty well until I was well north of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. And I think I had a good signal all the way out east in Indiana also. So...
and even as high as $1 million. Marriott has its own high-end residence program.
Marriott, the opportunity is going to ramp up the type of offering based on normal demand.
And Bloomberg Intelligence analyst Brian Eggers says demand is certainly there. According to his research, 1/3 of affluent travelers needed hotel alternatives in 2017. This year, it's only 2/3. Eggers says what would help Marriott stand out
The quality of the on-resident experience, the ease of booking, and city reservation.
is now at 23 and 53 past each hour from the Bloomberg Newsroom. Jessica Summers, News Radio 780 and 105.9 FM.
Every shower you can imagine, your basement and your plumbing line. If you have water backing up in your bathroom toilet, you may have a blocked door line. Get it checked out now by the specialist at Moines 911. Call Moines 911 at 1-833-PLUM-911. That's 1-833-PLUM-911. If you're sitting in traffic right now and you're wondering about that strange noise or dashboard light, stop wondering and call Andrew today. With expert technicians, state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment, and coding tools, serious problems during the call and complete office. Interstate transmission and engine repairs to bring maintenance and repair. Call 1-800-COAMCO. That's AMCO-AA. SCO transmission.
Thanks for calling. 1-800-GOT-JUNK. This is Sarah. How can I help? I was just calling to say thanks for saving my load. How did we do that? Our stuff was loaded, but we were out of time, and there was a mountain of junk rolling behind. My neighbors said, oh, I have got junk. They would spend the night. They could be here in 90 minutes. They came. You saved my load.
So here we are at the Mississippi River as I-280 crosses Sergeant Baker Bridge into Illinois. Okay, so that'll do it for that. I'll show you the other.
Emergency on the bike path.
Show you the other interstate bridge in the Quad Cities area, and that's Interstate 80, which crosses the Mississippi upstream of Bettendorf. It's the easternmost of the river crossings in the Quad Cities area of interstate status.
Get traffic and weather together on the 8s every 10 minutes on News Radio 780 and 105.9 FM.
The WBBM AccuWeather forecast.
This is Interstate 80 westbound. We've just left the interchange with I-88, and we're now heading in a northerly direction towards the Mississippi River, within east of Moline, Illinois. The bridge will take us across into Iowa at the end of this video. You notice by the sky in this video that there were some nasty thunderstorms in the area, and in fact, within about a half a mile of this video ending, the skies opened up, and I was forced into a rain delay for a little while. It's neat to drive these freeways out this way and have these huge thunderstorm clouds around you. It's a neat little effect for the video.
WBBM Sports. This is George off in Tigers score. A couple in the fifth now take the lead over the White Sox 3-2. The Cubs try to avoid that 4-game sweep at Pittsburgh. Serena Williams, Roger Federer, and Rafael Nadal advance at Wimbledon. The WBBM AccuWeather forecast could see a storm here or there this afternoon. Otherwise, sunny clouds. Heading up to 88. WBBM News Time 2:31.
CBS News Story 4. A magnitude 6.4 earthquake has hit Southern California. Its epicenter is in the town of Ridgecrest, which is in Kern County, more than 100 miles northeast of Los Angeles. Seismologist with the U.S. Geological Survey, Lucy Jones, says it is the strongest to hit Southern California in 20 years.
It's certain that this area is going to be shaken a lot today, and some of those aftershocks will probably exceed magnitude 5, which means they will become damaging.
There have been nearly 40 aftershocks. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans is in Los Angeles.
It felt like a big earthquake, and we knew it was either a big one or a small one that was right under us, or it was a big one that was further away from us, and that's what turns out to be the case. This was an earthquake about 150 miles north of Los Angeles. It was known as the Super Valley.
Evacuations are underway at Ridgecrest Regional Hospital, which reports at least one house fire in the area. CBS special report Matt Michael.
WBBM News Time 2:32. Weekend of wait and worry for some area residents after President Trump postponed planned immigration raids for 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago. WBBM talked with Chicago's 22nd Ward Alderman Michael Rodriguez. He's got people panicking, people very worried, people scared for their families. However, Deb Gordillo of the Illinois Republican National Hispanic Assembly says she's not really alarmed. She says what's happening now is not different than what's been happening over the last 20 years in terms of rates. State lawmakers could be getting 7 years of back pay and then some after a judge ruled that they violated.
Okay. And that is the most exciting part of I-80 in the Quad Cities area. Let's see. What do we want to do here? I'll show you.
Death. Like zombies.
I'll show you Interstate 380 in the city of Cedar Rapids,
You'd hear a lot of
which is an interesting little drive.
You'd hear him talking.
Yeah, you hear talking.
Cedar Rapids is about 20 miles north of Iowa City, along the 380 corridor, and it's a pretty sizable city by Iowa standards.
Well, let me tell you the story here.
So this was a neat little,
place itself was donated.
easy to film urban drive that
It was an old, I shouldn't say old.
I had a lot of fun doing. So
little office place, kind of like looks like
enjoy.
You remember the mobile classrooms?
Yes.
They look permanent. I'm not talking about the trailers.
Right.
They look, yeah. So that's what it is. It was donated there, so it's right on the edge of downtown, and private collection. A lady spent a lot of her life collecting salt shakers. She has over 15,000 sets of salt and pepper shakers.
Man, that's a lot of salt and pepper.
I mean, every shape imaginable.
Is she still collecting?
No, I think she's. I was going to say, is she even alive? No, I think she's in a nursing home there. I think she's still there. But the thing is you go in there, and the first thing you see is kind of like an old medicine show wagon that's just loaded with fruit, salt and pepper shakers, almost like an old-time fruit stand. And every salt and pepper shaker is either an orange or a banana or a tomato. And there's hundreds. I don't mean just a couple. There's hundreds of them. You go in this little bathroom they have, and there's a dish sitting there with false teeth in it. Salt and pepper yeah. No, false teeth. Salt and pepper shakers. There's a toothbrush, salt and pepper shaker. There's a roll of you-know-what hanging in there. Yeah, it's themed.
So is this something that you have to make an appointment to go see? Is it open to the public?
Public, yeah, you pay your admission fee.
Okay.
A couple of bucks.
So it's like a little museum type.
Trayer, Iowa. Where do I go to Trayer?
Right up there by Waterloo.
Right south
of Waterloo.
South Waterloo, yeah, about 20 minutes south of Waterloo.
Probably.
Yeah. And you get in there, and I'll tell you a secret, just because we're all kind of, buddies here. They have a little naughty closet. And, pardon me? Yeah. Bonnie knows what
And Bob would know what it's about.
And so, they have this little naughty closet, and it says on the front door, this is the naughty closet. And they keep the kids out of there? Yeah. And you open it up, and sure enough,
body salt
For body salt and pepper shakers.
pepper shakers. How can we say this? Adult themed. Yeah. Something you probably wouldn't find on your table, but I'd not heard about that aspect of this.
No, that's the first time you've ever told us that part.
This is huge. There's some that are themed after food, like there's a little frying pan with egg in it. The eggs, the salt, pepper, frying pan's the pepper shaker, you know. And,
Wow.
Hey, being brought to you by, that wasn't we have farm news too. Being brought to you by the Van Wall Group this morning. Hey, unload hours today, Cargill, Eddyville, till 4:30 this afternoon. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., so busy weekend looks like ahead. Cargill, Eddyville. Had a hay sale, Fort Atkinson, on Wednesday this past week. They'll not have one there in Dyersville, but we had a small sale, 14 consigners, 16 loads to 8 buyers, so a small run, and prices reflect that as well. Top was $140 on some first crop small squares, $210 top the straw small square. How about that? $210 for small squares, a ton of straw at that sale, but not really representative of what the market is because there's such a small run. Marketplace, well, things are closed until 8:30 this morning, so about an hour and 5 minutes from right now. We'll open this grain market up. It's been closed since noon on Wednesday. Here's where we left the market. December corn, 441 and a quarter. November beans, 908 and 3/4. So Doug starts tracking markets at 9:30 here at News Radio 1040 WHO.
My guess is you have just increased the attendance at the Salt Shaker Museum by about 50%.
And you know, the thing is, there's a little teeny sign. It's about 2 feet off the ground. It says World's Largest Salt and Pepper Museum, Shaker Museum. And it's on the way into town, and you miss it if you're not really looking for it. But I saw it one day.
On your way into town, coming from the south or from the north?
From the
Okay,
north.
from the north.
Yeah. And I said, I got to see this. this can't be real. And it's huge.
It is.
It is huge. It's like 5 or 6 rooms of nothing but wall-to-wall salt and pepper
I'm going to
shakers.
go see that. All right. Thank you, Bob. 7:25. Time for traffic and weather here on News Radio 1040 WHO. I love this country with all my heart. I love the United States of America.
Celebrating American independence. News Radio 1040 WHO.
I want to wish all the folks that work at the Van Wall Group a very happy 4th of July holiday weekend. That starts right at the top. Don Van Helling and all the people over there. Now Van Wall is going to give you $50 in in-store credit when you personally experience the many advantages that make John Deere small tractors the #1 choice for an overwhelming number of Iowans. It's very, very impressive. This drive-over easy attached deck, the drive-in loaders, the ability to run a mid-mount mower with one switch while running a rear-mounted tiller and another. They've got a little bit of everything. They've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, and then the ergonomic twin-touch automatic transmission foot controls, the responsive hydraulics, precision power steering, they are so easy to operate. And while the orange and red tractor folks can only talk about low-interest financing and their low prices, the Van Wall John Deere folks not only have a spec for price guarantee and the same 0% financing, you also get the best in features, reliability, and productivity for your land, not to mention their exclusive 10-year engine and powertrain warranty. So during the month of July, if you're a qualified property owner, you can get a $50 in-store credit for each compact utility tractor demo ride. So make sure you go to vanwall.com to find the location nearest you and tell them Dan and Bonnie sent you. Message and data rates may apply.
Back when your dad lost his hair, going to Bosley for hair restoration would have been a big deal. Luckily, nowadays, it's the norm. Like when you get sick, you go to the doctor. Toothache, dentist. Hair loss, Bosley. America's hair doctors. Bosley is America's #1 hair restoration expert. They can give you your real hair back permanently. Check them out today because they're giving away an absolutely free information kit and a free gift card to everyone who texts BEST to 85850. Lots of men get hair loss by the time they're 50. That's just how it is. You get hair loss, then you go to Bosley. It's the new norm. And the best part, Bosley's permanent solution to hair loss is protected by the Bosley Guarantee. Let Bosley show you, for free, how awesome your hair could look with an absolutely free information kit and a gift card for $250 off. Text BEST to 85850. That's BEST to 85850.
At 7:28, let's get a look at our traffic this morning. There are no delays on the interstate.
Okay. Let's see. I'll show you the Iowa 80 truck stop. So this is just off of an exit on Interstate 80. I'd say about 15 miles west of Davenport. And this is going to take you from the highway into the Iowa 80 complex. So it's kind of like a driving tour of the campus, if you will. So we enter through the non-truck entrance, and this is the main service building on the left. This is the main parking lot for cars. Trucks have their own large area for parking in the back, which we'll see in a little bit.
Other ways of going about this, and presumably we will find out more in just a couple hours.
CBS News correspondent Chip Reed from the White House.
The reason this is so strongly opposed by the ACLU, by civil rights groups, by Hispanic American groups, by immigrant groups, is they believe that if a question is on the census saying, are you a U.S. citizen, a lot of immigrants will not even answer, not even fill out the form.
CBS News update on that fight.
WBBM News Time 136, a new research in Britain finding companies are holding back from investing in staff and technology amid Brexit uncertainty.
Britain's Institute of Directors says half of the 900 directors surveyed said economic conditions in Britain and the uncertain trading status with the EU were hurting their businesses. The group's chief economist says the nature of Brexit is still ambiguous. Personnel in motion, businesses are hesitating, he said, to the detriment of Britain's productivity growth. The leadership races on to replace Prime Minister Theresa May, who is quitting as leader of the Conservative Party after Parliament rejected her Brexit deal. Charles Smith.
A reminder, you can stream WBBM through our website or the radio.com app, or just ask Alexa or Google Home to play WBBM News Radio. Dave Ross is just ahead, and we'll check traffic and weather, low gas prices in 60 seconds. WBBM News Time 137.
So here's the truck entrance, and you can see the rather sizable truck parking area straight ahead. As we head around the back side of the service building, you'll see a lot of facilities for trucks and their drivers. You'll see this guy who is just content with walking up the road while I guess he's trying to park. I don't know what that was all about. So we have all sorts of stuff on the left. We have a full service repair shop, a truck wash area, pretty much anything and everything that you would need as a trucker and as a truck driver you have at your disposal here. This is quite an impressive and sizable campus. And it's billed as the world's largest truck stop. And it's hard to imagine something that would be more complete than this.
Inbound flow in the west end, then Fullerton to downtown, 43 in from O'Hare, 30 from the junction, 18 in the express lane. The outbound side of the ice, 25 command line, 38 to 390. That slowdown goes from Laramie to First. Inbound slowdowns go from North Avenue to the Tri-State, Austin, and Western to downtown, 39 to 390. Outbound Stevenson, 26 out to the Tri-State, 26 back in. Northbound I-55 still jammed from 129 to Arsenal, ongoing
towards this corner of the complex, we have the National Trucking Museum, which is located across the way from the full-service building. It's an interesting little addition there.
Wall Street to Dow down 35. NASDAQ is down 7, and the S&P is down. WBBM News Time 140. Walk right this way. This is Dave Ross on the CBS News Radio Network, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our Jeffrey Fowler about how China has made its airports super friendly.
Go to a Chinese airport, not only can your face be your boarding pass, but also if you step up to one of those signs where they tell you what flights are leaving, it'll scan your face and tell you, oh, yours is fleet number 23, walk this way.
Yeah, all thanks to face recognition. No fumbling with a boarding pass with ID, no getting lost, just look at the camera. And American airports are starting to use face-based boarding as well. There's this at first, but once they start offering extra legroom for a face scan, well, then Frank the one said, who wouldn't give up essential liberty for a little temporary legroom? Plus, the Department of Homeland Security plans to face scan 97% of passengers to make sure they leave the country when they're supposed to. And I'm guessing the logical next step would be for security cameras within the country to scan for the people who do not leave when they're supposed to. Which, of course, means scanning everyone because it's against the lawmakers.
Yeah, so that's basically the gist of that video.
Don't worry, I'm pretty sure the government would.
And let's say we will wrap up our video previews with this full-length drive of Interstate 235 through central Des Moines. Now, I mentioned earlier that the period of uploading for California videos will be complete in a couple of weeks on October 24th, and for about a week after that I'll be doing a couple of other little things in between the ending of the California series and the beginning of the next series after that. One of the things I'll be doing is uploading stuff from some of the other states that I visited along the way that I don't have the time to do full series for. So Iowa's one of those states, and so in order to hold people over for a little while, I'm going to upload the footage I have from I-235 just to get some stuff in the Iowa playlist so that those playlists aren't sitting there empty. And then at some point in the future we'll go back and we'll populate the rest of the playlist with all the other videos that I've already done on this trip. So this video takes you on the entire interstate. It's about a 14-mile trip altogether. And I did it all in one video. I did not break it up into multiple files. So it's a nice, uninterrupted, again, a very pleasant urban drive that I had a lot of fun covering. So hope you guys enjoy this one. This is one of the videos that will be uploaded towards the end of the month. So you will be able to watch this and its eastbound companion video by the time Halloween rolls around.
So let's say you plan it on the 20th. Where would you say we are growing per unit wise?
I'm going to say we're down about 150.
Actually, we're not down that much. We're only down about 60.
No, is that right?
Believe it or not.
Then we have caught up quite a lot here in the last. And, you know, effective growing degree days, that thing cut off at 86.
Yeah, they do 6. Yeah, they do, which is, if you look at the chart, the last, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the last 8 days have both been above maximum growing degree units. Now, let's say that you planted on the 1st of, let's say you planted on the 1st of May.
Okay.
Where do you think we're at?
Have we caught up?
We have not. We have not. We're about 45 behind.
See, here's the deal, and one thing everyone forgets is that seed doesn't have a life, and its life starts when it hits the ground.
I sometimes wonder.
Yeah.
Did I just seed?
Yeah.
The seed you're talking about?
The history of that seed starts when you throw it in the ground. So each growing degree calculation needs to be based on when the seed hit the ground in your place. And so we get so tied up on looking at growing degree days that we forget. Well, I didn't plant till May 18th or May 15th or May 16th, and so I may be on track for May 16th planting. Now you're going to be behind overall. I get that part, but or you may be way short. There was a time we were 100 plus degrees, growing degrees behind.
Well, that's what these numbers show. It's just how cold it was towards the end of April and the first part of May. So the final part of this conversation is if you planted on the 1st of June, you're even. You're caught up with normal growing degree days. Now, again, as you point out, you're behind. Seed is behind. But growing degree days for June planted corn and soybeans, it's kind of been a normal year for that.
Now think about water as well. We think we have been sloppy wet. Actually, on the farms that we monitor, the farm we have our hayfields, we're about break-even right now because we had been painfully rough, and then we got painfully wet. So you're starting off on Jan 1 looking at the water situation. But if you look at it, again, that seed doesn't have a brain. So you throw it in the ground, that's when its water collection starts, and it may be painfully wet on that seed. We may be way ahead since you planted that corn or bean out there, but on the kind of seasonal, we're right about normal.
To think, moving forward, Mother, and this is obvious, but something to say that the weather is really going to be the determining factor as to where we go. Some of these probably going to need an extended fall to
We're not going to back there on some of this to November 1st.
yeah.
So,
But hold on. I mean, it depends. If it stays warm like it has been and we continue to exceed growing degree days, it'll bring it down in a hurry. If it stays warm like it has, then we better hope we continue to get rain because those root systems aren't deep. Well, particularly if it's going to turn off dry, it needs to do it now while the roots are still developing because once you hit that time, right, that's when roots stop growing stuff. Yeah. So if it's going to be dry, we need to develop root systems. That time is
the deal is, again, remember, the time starts ticking when you throw that bean in the ground. And, a lot of times it may be experiencing a normal growing season, albeit a little bit late. If that's the case, yeah, we may not hit black layer or some of this, or we may be harvesting some awfully wet corn.
Yeah, and that's the same with soybeans. Remember I was telling you one time when they had a neighbor of mine in Cambridge, I had a cover crop down and it was so wet he couldn't get that out. Right. And they planted soybean in that field in the middle of June or late June. And that soybean crop really didn't get completed. It was pretty wet.
Now, being a photosynthetic crop, photosynthesis cuts back in short. And soybeans are that's what forces it to bloom, and that's what forces it to, is that daylight change. So that's a little bit different than growing degree. Yeah, that needs to get out of the ground. I get that. But as far as growing degree, or as far as the hours of daylight, then you really start getting to it.
But that was a pretty good year for production in corn and soybean that year. But that particular field of soybean didn't do that.
My little buddy out there who's selling grain dryers right now, you better have his order pad out because I think we're going to be in the drying business here.
I was thinking if you're in that market, you might want to get one on the books, right?
It could be a tough year for drying corn. Hey, we need to move on here, Andy. What's three big things we need to know?
Follow up to the letter from 13 oil patch senators to the president saying they need to back off USDA Secretary Tony Perdue when it comes to looking into the EPA's decision making on the small refinery waivers. Now, Senator Grassley says that it's a matter of being a whistleblower, not a matter of past authority, but rather the waivers have already cost corn ethanol billions of gallons of lost demand, with more losses possible, and is the law being followed? He says that it ought to be looked into.
So they're going to announce in November the RFS for next year. I think it's $19 billion this year, and then you get these waivers and it's backed off 10% or more?
No, he says the waivers have more than tripled, including some handed out to profitable refiners since the president took office, and EPA needs to bring that under control. Close to a vaccine? Well, we're told, in this country at least, that the vaccine for African swine fever is 5, if not longer, years away. But now, Vietnamese officials say they've had some early success in creating one in Texas farms. Usually, of course, across Southeastern Asia, and it's led to the culling of about 10% of Vietnam hog herds there. Vietnam TV report says that in initial trials, 31 of 33 tanks ingested with the test vaccine are still healthy after getting 2 shots over a period of months. Professor of epidemiology, however, tells Reuters that they need to see different phases of clinical trials, first an experimental setting with controlled exposure, and then a field trial before determining successful failure. A joyful experience. We talk a lot about making sure that the eating experience with our product is enjoyable, but what about sweet corn? What's the key?
As soon as you pick it off of the stalk, that is the highest sugar content of the corn that you're going to have. And heat turns that sugar into starch.
That's Gary Knight, one of the top sweet corn growers in the state. It says the worst thing you can do is buy the sweet corn at lunch and leave it in your hot car all afternoon. Says the key is to get it on ice almost immediately until you can get home to cook. 11:16 on the Big Show clock, and those are the 3 big things you need to know.
In the tradition of WHO storytellers like Ronald Reagan and Van Harten, I'm proud that my show is now on WHO. I'm Lee Aviv, and my show is called Our American Stories. No politics, no opinions, just great stories. Listen tonight at 10 on News Radio 1040, WHO.
Hey, Coalition Support Iowa's Farmers bringing you weather here during the Big Show. They also present the Working Good Farm Neighbor Award, of which we will be doing next week again, going in East Central Iowa to honor our latest edition of the Working Good Farm Neighbor Award winners. 2019 marks 15 years of helping livestock farmers successfully and responsibly manage changes on their livestock farms. Visit supportfarmers.com to find out more. Also, that Good Farm Neighbor Award and the Green Farmstead Partnership. That's 10 years old. The Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers, your farm, your family, their focus. Doug, Justin's away from the weather office today. What's going on worldwide cropping conditions?
Well, let me run down some information out of South America, Brazil. Specifically dry with only a lingering light rain in northern Paraná. Mostly dry Saturday and Sunday. Temperatures averaging well below normal during this period. Frost or light freeze warnings through Archdiaz, Santa Catarina, and southern Paraná. Chance for frost in northern Paraná with patch of light freeze conditions possible. So here we are talking about early frost come October, November, December, and they're seeing some of that down there. Forecast there says light to locally moderate showers during the past 48 hours. Mainly dry elsewhere in the region. Temperatures above normal Wednesday, near to below normal south, and above normal Thursday. So it appears to me this weather is a day or so old from the world weather roundup.
Well, that's the way you're correct all the time. You're always use the weather forecast.
All right, and as I-235 westbound comes to an end at I-35 and 80, I'm going to bring this webinar to a close. So I appreciate those of you who were able to tune in this morning. Again, I recognize that the timing of this was not optimal, but it was the best option that I could do given my unavailability in coming weeks, and really what my original intent was, which was to bring additional folks into the mix here to provide their professional input on certain topics that, of course, as we know, got scrapped because the main individual I wanted to have here today was a no-show. So, it's frustrating. It is what it is. But I appreciate you guys tuning in and checking out the freeways of Iowa this morning. So, we will wrap this up here, and I want to thank you guys again for your patience and for joining me this morning, and I look forward to doing another one of these at some point in the future. We'll have to see exactly what the format will be, but we will make that announcement at the proper time. And until next time, thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you later. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.